Why is the US a successful country according to you?
Well, because we're still here, we still have the best military, the strongest military in the world, and so therefore we can impose our will on everybody else, and they have to respect us. I mean, you look at the Venezuela raid. Trump called the weapon that they used to knock everything out the discombobulator. And anybody that studied, the alien disclosure and all that stuff, that's one of the things that the UFOs have in common is they have some kind of a I don't know, you call it a weapon, but a technology that basically can freeze people where they can't move, they're aware, but they can't do anything. Or, like, for example, when you listen to the testimony of the guys that were working at the Air Force Base, the missile base in the UK, I think it was the 1960s or maybe 70s, if I'm not mistaken, where a UFO showed up over the missile silos and just hovered there, and then one by one, each missile like went offline. Just the lights went out on it, and it just sat there. I don't know for an hour, and they were filming it and drawing sketches of it and calling like, "There's this fucking disc hanging up, above our silos," and they turned everything off. And then at some point, the UFO just goes and just shoots straight up, and it's gone out of sight in fractions of a second. It's just, and then like I think it was like 5-10 minutes later, it's been gone for a bit. One by one, each missile got turned back on in the same way that it turned them off. And that was the aliens basically saying, we can turn your shit off at will. And so I assume because we have all this back engineered technology that it's probably one of those weapons that we might have gotten from the aliens or the exchange program. And I was just before we went live, I was watching an interview with one of our congressmen, and President Trump has basically ordered the Department of War to give access to members of Congress to basically go out there. Like Area 51's one of them, but none of the really good stuff is even kept there these days. But it'll be like a nostalgia type thing. So they'll go and they look around, but they know where all these discs and these back engineered craft are. And but you're getting a lot of resistance from the people that are in possession of those, the defense contractors that are in possession of those, because they don't want to give it up. They don't think that the current leaders of the world are basically have the capacity to understand the technology, to use the technology, to have control of the technology. And that's why, for many decades, they've kept it from most presidents and not even briefed them on it because it's been so highly compartmentalized. Only a small group of people even knew that we had this stuff and where it was at. And so they're getting, pushback from the defense, you can say, call it the military industrial complex, where they don't want to really give up control of those things. And so he's pushing them to do that. So the Department of Defense is doing everything they can to try to get these congressmen into these facilities so they can go put their eyes on these back engineer craft. And it's really fascinating to me to go from reading about this stuff in college, where I had to go to the library, and this is like 1989, 90, 91, and like when I was in college up at Gainesville, and I had like some of my classes, just the way they were scheduled, I had an hour and a half, sometimes 3 hours in between a class, but it took me like 45 minutes to drive home and back. So it's like an hour and a half round trip to drive home and hang out for a half hour, and then I got to drive all the way back. So I would just stay there and read books. I'd read like Zachariah Sitchin's stuff, Chariots of the Gods, all these interesting books on ancient civilizations and history, UFOs. Philip J. Corso, he wrote his book in the 1990s. It was called The Day After Roswell, and he said that he was in charge after the Roswell disc crashed of trying to back engineer and figure out something useful that they could use the technology for. And so he was the one that gave it to different defense contractors and said, "Hey, see what you guys can do with this stuff." And so to see all that stuff and go from having to read it in the library and like drive to a library and sit there, and you only have the books that are there, to be able to have access to YouTube and podcasts and all these people, you can listen to them talk and you can do this research, and then to see that the president is finally forcing disclosure. And what I also been reading is that at some point this year, sometime this summer, that Donald Trump is basically going to give a presidential address and basically say, yeah, aliens are real. They've been here this whole time. And here's what we know. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that'd be fascinating if that does happen.
But it's just crazy because, oh, that's a conspiracy. That's ridiculous. There's no such thing as UFOs. You're an idiot. They had Project Blue Book back in the 50s, and it turns out it was all bullshit. And here come to find out, there was just too many government witnesses that came forward. And so what's interesting about when you study like misinformation, and so it's been known for decades that the Department of War leaks like a sieve. Our most advanced projects, our weapons, it gets leaked. And so when you understand that our best technology is going to get leaked at some point to our adversaries, you want to make it so nobody can figure out what's the real truth and capabilities and what's bullshit. And so like, you give an example, like you look at the different alien races that there supposedly are. There's the tall blondes, you have the little grays with like the bug eyes. You have the supposedly like the lizard people. The lizards are the really bad lizard people, the really bad ones that are causing all the problems. And so you got all these different. Then you got the ones that are like praying mantis, supposedly.
Oh, those are like insect.
Yeah, they're like insect types, and some of the alien races are benevolent and they're trying to help us evolve and undo the negative influence of like the evil type aliens, like the lizard people, I guess, or the what do they call them? The reptilians, they tend to call 'em. Like David Icke talks a lot about those. However, what's really interesting is all the whistleblowers that talk about that, they've never seen any evidence or heard any stories from anybody, any of the whistleblowers about any reptilians. So in that case, I look at it and I go, well, that would probably mean that the whole reptilian thing is bullshit. That's the psyop. That's the fake one. But the praying mantis type, the grays, the tall blondes, the Nordic ones, the humanoid style, the hybrids, there's lots of people that have personal experience with those that have come out over the decades and said, I'll swear under oath, I'll testify at what I saw and what I was involved in. But not been a single person, not a single witness has said that the reptilians are real. Not only that, they've never heard anything about reptilians. Like in the 1980s, there was this television show, it was actually really good, called V, stood for Visitors, and then later Victory. You know, these aliens come, oh, hey, we're going to share our technology. Our world's like dying. We need, just need water and some things, and we'll share our technology with you. And in reality, it turns out they were coming to, take the water from the planet, and they had a problem with food. And so they were using humans as food. And it came to find out they looked like humans, but it was like a human, like bulletproof skin that they wore, like a body armor that looked like a humanoid. And because someone would tear it off, and they were like lizard people underneath. And so that's why I think the lizard people thing is the psyop, and David Icke is the victim of the lizard people psyop, because they're supposedly, when you listen to him, they're the worst ones. The reptilians are the worst ones, the most evil ones that are treating us like cattle and causing most of the problems. Like I said, I think the reptilians are the bullshit one. I think they're the psyop, and all the rest of them are the legit ones because you got witnesses that came forward. But who knows? It's really interesting to speculate, but hopefully this summer we'll have a better idea. It'll be interesting to see what Trump has to say. Because I think that's what some of the Congress people are doing. It's because they've read the stuff in the skiff. They can't talk about it, but for them to go and maybe meet some of these alien races or see some of the bodies, and then they can come back and report and have it declassified and say what they saw, and here's what we have. I mean, that's pretty amazing.
Hmm. Oh,
Fascinating.
The show's called Rise of the 49ers.
Oh, the documentary?
Yeah. Wouldn't that send, if that stuff came out, wouldn't that just send the world into like a frenzy?
Well, that was the justification in 1947 that who was it? President Truman and General Curtis LeMay and the other top generals said, if we let it be known that there's little, these little aliens out there and we're not alone in the universe, our society wouldn't be able to handle it. And so we better just to lie to the people and say it was a hoax or a weather balloon. And while we continue to try to examine this stuff and figure out a way to back engineer it. Because more than likely, if they're crashing in our country, they're probably crashing in the Russian country, they're crashing in China. And there was evidence that they all had retrieved craft as well. And so the whole world was, or the governments of the world, especially the big ones, were in possession of these craft, and everybody's trying to back engineer them. And basically, whoever wins that race, can control the world in essence. And like I said, that's why I think what was used in Venezuela, the discombobulator, as Trump said, sounds exactly like the alien technology that I've read about for decades. The people that worked with it have said that stuff. And plus, when you look at Travis Walton, the one that was that DB Sweeney played in the 90s, where he was a logger, and there was this disc, and they were driving along in a pickup, and they stopped and were like, "What is that?" And then he got out, and they're like, "Travis, get back out, get back here." And he wouldn't listen. He just kept walking out there into the field and was kind of looking up at it, and it just went, it zapped him, and he kind of froze, and he just kind of, it like beamed him up basically, and they freaked out and took off and went and told everybody, and they're like, they couldn't find him. And they all was just like, "You guys have lost your mind. You're just pulling a hoax on us." And then like a week later, he shows back up, kind of doesn't really have much recollection. He's got like missing time. And it was a really cool movie, but the technology was used on him to freeze him in place like that. Because supposedly people were like bleeding from their eyes and their ears and stuff. That could have been a sonic weapon they were using as well. But it turned off their air defenses. And like I said, that's what, the alien technology they read about from the whistleblowers, that's one of the things they say we have. 81% think we are not alone. I mean, the government's already came out in the New York Times years ago and say, yeah, we're in possession of alien craft that were not manufactured on planet Earth. That's just crazy to go from reading the stuff in the books, and you kind of know it's true, but it's hard to figure out what's actually true, what's bullshit. And here we are, everybody's kind of like, oh yeah, water's wet, sky's blue, what's the big deal?